I wanted to start by asking you about what's at stake in this election. So the two parts to this question. What do you think the consequences would be for California if Governor Newsom is recalled? And then on the other side of that, what might follow for California if you're elected, and what specific qualifications do you have that would better serve our state while we deal with COVID, wildfires, a drought, and numerous other challenges?
Colleen, well, thank you for the question. And I would say, first and foremost, overall, we have to make California more affordable and more livable. Let me start on the affordability side of the equation, because it's something I feel very strongly and passionately about. Our state's too expensive. Just flat out, it's too expensive. And that's one of the reasons why I've put forward what will be the largest middle-class tax cut in California history. People are voting with their feet. They're leaving our great state. You name the state that they're going to, because they can't afford it. And so rather than what we see from this governor and this legislature, which is constantly send us more money to Sacramento, raising taxes, I believe strongly that we need to let Californians keep more of their hard-earned money in their pocket. And I think that's a fundamental difference and a fundamental change that I will bring to the state, which is one of, I understand that we're in a competitive environment. We have to compete. We have to compete for jobs. We have to compete on affordability. And we better have policies that come out of Sacramento that actually understand that and will realize that. In California, in terms of making it more livable, again, I think these issues of quality of life, and I'm sure we're going to get into the specifics, but I'll just touch on two very quickly. Ones, again, that I feel very strongly about. The issue of homelessness and the rapid increase all across our state. This is an issue I tackled head on as mayor of San Diego, where we actually were able to reduce homelessness by double digits. I did not allow tent encampments on the sidewalks in San Diego. And I'm happy to get into the thoughts and the actions that we took to make that happen, because we helped people and we cared about people. We cared about people enough not to let them die on the sidewalk. And that's what happens when you allow tent encampments, and we see what's going on in California as compared to so many other places. We have to turn that around. And actually, another issue that I'll pause here, but the issue of public safety. I realized as mayor that if you don't have a safe city, you don't have anything. If we don't have a safe state, we don't have anything. And so I'm going to be a governor that is going to stand up for safe neighborhoods, that's going to support victims' rights, not talk about the rights of criminals, which is what Gavin Newsom does all the time. But everybody has the right to feel safe in their neighborhood, safe to walk outside, safe to open a business, not have to close businesses, which I highlighted in San Francisco because of the rising theft and crime there. And so we have a governor that doesn't seem to think that that's a problem right now. Californians know differently, as we see not only the spike in crime, but particularly in homicide. So making California more affordable, making California more livable, and our quality of life is going to be an overall significant difference under the Faulconer administration than what we've seen currently.
Mayor, our next question will come from Jack Oman.
Hello, Jack. I think you're on mute, Jack.
You'll probably wish I was. I'm the Deputy California Opinion Editor and the editorial cartoonist. Thanks for coming. Mayor, do you think President Trump is a liar?
Look, I think people are going to have different views on the president. My campaign is not about litigating the past and what happened with this, the former president. It's about the failures under this governor. And I think that's what Californians care about. And that's what I've been focusing my campaign on about. There's plenty of dysfunction in Washington, D.C. There's plenty of back and forth. But I think, to answer your question directly, what Californians want is a governor that's going to bring people together, a governor that's not hyper-focused on partisanship, but actually is going to work on leadership. And I've said this many times, and I believe it. I think the Californians don't really care if you have an R or a D next to your name. They want to know, are you actually going to make a difference in our neighborhoods? They want to know, as I said, you're going to make it safe. You're going to make California more affordable. Are you going to make a difference? And look, I'm a proud Republican who got elected twice in a deep blue city, in a deep blue state. How did I do that? By bringing people together. And I think most of the things that we're going to talk about today during this conversation, I strongly believe are not about partisanship. It's about common sense. And when you frame things in terms of actual results, when you frame things in terms of common sense and solutions, which is what my campaign is about, I think people will respond well to you.
Mayor, do you think President Trump is a liar?
As I said before, I think, look, I don't think this campaign is about President Trump.
Well,
I will tell you, I think Gavin Newsom was recently caught lying about fire management and about fire prevention. And I called him out on that. And I'm going to continue to call out what I think is what we're facing here in California and focus on California issues and not try to litigate all the back and forth that everybody always wants to in terms of what's going on in Washington, D.C.
Well, I think fundamentally the question is, do you think President Trump is a liar? And that goes to the root of your assertion that if you don't think he's a liar, then how can you criticize the governor for being a liar?
I just told you he was. And I think it was absolutely put out there when we talked about, particularly when you said you didn't go out and do what we're supposed to be doing in terms of fire management and fuel management. And I think you have to be upfront. And so as I said, I'm going to have a administration that's actually going to put the dollars into wildfire prevention. I'm going to declare a state of emergency to waive the environmental regulations to allow us to actually do the acres that the governor claimed that he was doing that he didn't, and to treat this on a war footing. And so I'm going to be very direct when it comes to those issues of California and call out the governor when we're saying do one thing, but yet we find out that it was something else. The stakes are too high not to be upfront and honest with Californians. And I will tell you, look, I get questions a lot. Folks want me to talk about either President Trump or President Biden. I get it. But this is about California. This is about the failure of this governor and about a recall that 2 million Californians signed because they want a change at the top and they want a governor who's going to bring people together.
Here's the question then. Are you not going to answer the question about whether you think President Trump is a liar?
Well, I think I answered your question and what I'm going to focus on here in California, and I feel strongly about that. And I think that's what Californians want this debate to be about, not about Washington, D.C., but about California. Look, if I wanted to litigate the former president's tenure, I'd be running for Senate. I'm running for governor.
Thanks.
Governor, our next question is from Garth Stapley.
Hello, Garth. I think you might be on mute too, Garth.
Thanks for taking our questions. I'm Garth Stapley, opinion editor with the Sacramento Bee. Here in the Central Valley, our economy depends heavily on agriculture, as you know, and we have to have reliable access to river water. Yeah. California's water wars threaten those irrigation sources. What qualifications do you have to confront this complex issue, and how would you handle it?
Well, I will agree with the premise of your question, and it is the most important issue, I think, facing the Central Valley right now. And I think it's important to have a governor that understands how incredibly important agriculture is to not just our state, but indeed the rest of the nation. The Central Valley is the breadbasket for the United States. Water is the lifeblood. Earlier this week, laying out a plan for additional water resources. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and not making any changes and expecting different things to happen. Here we are in another drought, and yet what we haven't done is actually increase the supplies. And yet we've had projects on the book, to be very specific, Sites Reservoir and Temperance Flat, that need to be constructed. We need to increase our surface water supplies, make that more available, particularly for folks in the Central Valley. And what we have had, unfortunately, is a governor that has shown zero on that front. And so I feel very, very strongly that we actually need to move forward with those projects. All we've had is rhetoric, we've had talk, but no action. funding for these projects and additional fundings for our canals and water conveyance, which is equally as important in the valley, particularly because of subsidence, needs to be a priority. And the fact that it hasn't been, I think, is just shocking. And I can tell you, I've been spending time in Fresno, Bakersfield, Visalia, Modesto. It is front and center. They want a governor that's going to stand up for water and agriculture, and I will do just that. Not just talk about it, but actually move forward on constructing this infrastructure to finally get it done.
Mayor, our next question is from Stephanie Finucane.
Good morning, Mayor. I'm Stephanie Finucane. I'm the opinion editor at the San Luis Obispo Tribune. And my question deals with energy. Yeah. Governor Newsom has been both blamed and credited with playing a key role in the upcoming closure of the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. And now some nuclear power supporters say there is no way that California can generate enough energy to both replace Diablo Power and meet its clean energy goals. Do you think the plant should stay open? And there's a part 2 to this. Do you think California is on track to generate enough clean energy to both replace Diablo and meet its goals?
No, I don't think nuclear energy is part of our California future. So the answer is no on the plant. I do believe that what we have is a tremendously innovative economy. And I think one of the things that we need to do is to incentivize that innovation in terms of what we're doing in terms of battery storage, a variety of other technologies here in California that I think will help lead that path forward. But I think what's also important is that, particularly when we look at, in the Central Valley and domestic energy production, that we do not shut that all down. That allows us to be dependent upon oil from Saudi Arabia. And that's what is going to happen if you stop energy production in Kern County. And so, again, I feel very strongly about that. These are good quality California jobs, and that's going to be a part of our transition to the future.
Mayor, our next question is from Tad Weber.
Oh, Tad?
Hi, Mayor Faulconer. I'm the opinion editor here at the Fresno Bee. So when Governor Newsom campaigned for office, he said he would push for a goal of construction of 3.5 million new homes by 2025. So far, less than 100,000 homes annually have been built. In May, the median home price for California rose above $800,000.
Yeah.
So here's the questions. What specifically would you do to increase housing production? And why should a young couple starting out or a young family looking to put down roots believe you can make a difference for them?
Well, look, I think you hit the nail on the head. And what we're seeing, which is typical of this governor, is a bunch of plans and promises and then no action across the spectrum of all of the things that we're talking about. We need to increase supply in California, period. And we need to provide the incentives to do that and the legislation and policies to do that. I will tell you first and foremost that CEQA is used as a weapon to stop good quality projects in California from happening. We need to reform that process. It takes too long and too expensive. People have been talking about changing CEQA for a decade, but yet nobody's had the political will to actually do it. We have to do it. Look, I felt so strongly about increasing the supply, and particularly where we want it, which is along our transportation corridors. We did a project in San Diego, citywide. We called it Complete Communities, which in essence had to say the very definition of smart growth, which is where do we want new housing, and more importantly, where, just as important, where do you not want it? We did a citywide environmental impact report. Took over a year to do it because you had to go through that process. But I wanted to streamline it so you can say the zoning is done. You can get a permit over the counter. We reduce costs. We reduce parking regulation in our transit corridors. We took action. And in fact, this plan will allow for the construction of 100,000 new units in the city of San Diego. And we passed that, I believe it was unanimously. Again, a Republican with a majority Democrat city council. That's the type of leadership that you need to do, to say enough of the talk and the rhetoric. Let's actually put plans in place that make it easier and you can actually construct the housing that California needs. What happens if we don't? People are going to continue to leave California because they can't afford it.
Mayor, our next question will be asked by Hannah Holzer.
Hello, Mayor Faulconer. My name is Hannah Holzer. I'm opinion assistant at the Sacramento Bee. Mayor, homelessness is getting worse in California and not better. Commissions have been established, millions have been committed to the problem, and yet it gets worse. You said earlier in this interview that as mayor, you required people to move off of the streets and into shelters. Although some have said that plan didn't have a lasting impact, and others said the plan didn't solve the issue of homelessness in San Diego, but instead pushed unhoused folks into outlying neighborhoods. Can you address those shortcomings and also talk about how California as a state can better help its homeless population?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. And I might give you a little longer answer because I think it's a very important topic. We took action in San Diego. All of the other, supposed steps, housing first, et cetera, wasn't working. When I first came into office as mayor, I went along with all that. And it wasn't making the changes that we needed to do. And we took significant action. I set up a series of bridge shelters in San Diego. I picked the locations myself. And I made a deal with the community. I said it's going to be cleaner and safer in this neighborhood with this shelter than before it was there. And I felt so strongly about that that I created a new division in the San Diego Police Department called the Neighborhood Policing Division, whose sole focus was on quality of life and homelessness. That division became the #1 referral source for our shelter system. It worked. And again, I believe very strongly that every human being has a right to shelter. I believe that. I also believe that when we provide it, you have an obligation to use it. I enforced that obligation as mayor of San Diego, and it worked. We saw tent encampments go away. We saw people getting the help and the support and the shelters that they needed, and we transitioned folks into that place of their own. As I said earlier, if you allow people to live in an unclean, unsafe, unsanitary environment, they're going to die there. We're better than that as Californians. And I will tell you, I'm so proud of all of our service providers and as again, the shelters that we provided. And in fact, we took it to the next level during COVID when I opened up our San Diego Convention Center, brought everybody under one roof because we couldn't achieve the physical distancing in the shelters. Brought the VA and the county and mental health, all of the wraparound services in our shelters, also in the convention center. We housed, transitioned 1,000 people the last several months that I was mayor. That does work. And let me maybe just digress for maybe 60 more seconds because it was a part of a story that I told at my State of the City speech a couple years ago. I was out cutting the ribbon on a hotel that was a former Motel 6 that we had transformed into a place for formerly homeless veterans. I'm getting ready to, start the ceremony, and a guy walks up to me, and he points at me and he says, "Hey, you're the mayor, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "I just wanted to say thank you." And I said, "Hey, I appreciate that. I think this is going to be, a great facility and all that." I started going, and he stopped me and he said, "No, I want to thank you for cleaning up the tents underneath the freeway." He said, "I was one of the individuals living in those tents." Long story short, his name was Brian. He was a Navy veteran, was in construction, got addicted to methamphetamine, lost his construction job, was in the tents, and as he was saying, doing things that he shouldn't be doing. But because we intervened, because we said, no, can't live out here, went to the Veterans Bridge shelter that I had set up, found out that he had VA benefits that he wasn't collecting. Long story short, got himself clean and sober. He's now was a peer counselor at that place. His point was that he would have been there still if we hadn't intervened. And that's something, again, that particularly, and I saw this time and time again, when folks that have lost their support network, gone through their families, gone through their friends, lost their jobs, they're in a state, particularly if you're addicted to methamphetamine or heroin, you're not going to make those right decisions for yourselves. Again, we're better than that to intervene, to say we have a better place for you to go. And it's not underneath a freeway. It's not in front of somebody's house. It's not in front of somebody's business. And stood up to make those tough decisions. And guess what? We helped people. And it worked. And I'm going to lead by example as governor. I'm going to take that exact same approach, and I'm going to lead on state property, again, with a right to shelter and an obligation to use it. We made a dramatic difference in San Diego. And in fact, we had about 13 other cities that came to visit the ecosystem that we had set up before COVID, of course. Had a chance to go out to the shelters that we had set up. It wasn't about just a bed. It was about the wraparound services, the mental health, all the storage centers that we'd set up, the safe parking zones. And so this is an area that you see it in every city right now. It is going the wrong direction. It's not, you can throw all the money in the world at this. If you don't have the political will to make a difference on the street, it's not going to change. I'm going to bring that will as governor.
Mayor, the next question is from Yusef Beg.
Good morning, Mayor. Appreciate your time. Good to be with you. I want to touch on COVID. Obviously, counties throughout California are reimposing mask requirements, with the Delta variant accounting for 83% of new infections nationwide and almost all hospitalizations. Many Republican officials flout public health orders and try to discredit experts like Dr. Fauci, CDC, who often are influencing a lot of the policies we set at the local level. As governor, would you follow the guidance of experts like that? And if the FDA fully approves COVID vaccines in the coming months, would you support a vaccine requirement for all eligible Californians?
Well, I haven't been in favor of mandates. What I have been in favor is everybody getting the vaccine. That is our best way to get out of this. And what I tell you, one of the concerns that I've had, particularly recently, is the fact that we have the shifting regulations. I'm vaccinated myself. My family is as well. Again, we want to do everything we can to increase people's trust in getting the vaccine and not the hesitancy. And I think what we're seeing, unfortunately, and it's very unfortunate, particularly in the last week, with the changing circumstances of you wear a mask or not wear a mask if you're vaccinated. And so I think we need to do everything possible, educate, to have folks get the vaccine, because that's how we are going to get out of this. And I am a strong proponent of educating, not mandating.
Mayor, it appears that I have the next question. My name is Marcos Bertone. I am the California opinion editor for McClatchy newspapers, and it's good to be with you. Sir, my children didn't get to attend classes with their friends in the last academic year.
Yeah.
The Sacramento public school they attend didn't reopen until late April, and even then, just 2 days a week for a few hours a day. My kids didn't think that it was worth the hassle to go back under those terms when their major projects were due and when finals were approaching. In private schools and parochial schools, following CDC guidelines and attending schools in person are not subject to negotiation, but in public schools, they are. That's why the doors were closed to my kids. What would you have done as governor to open the door to my kids when the California Teachers Association stood in the way?
Marcos, it was a travesty what happened in California public schools this past semester. I'm a proud dad with 2 kids in public schools. Our schools should have been open. And the inequities that you just talked about are absolutely real. And in fact, I launched my campaign several months back in San Pedro, out in front of a closed public school. And I picked at that location specifically because across the street, very next kitty corner, was a private school, the same grade level that was open. Teachers safely teaching, kids safely learning. Why? Because that school reported to parents. But yet the public schools that ultimately reported to Gavin Newsom were closed. Our schools should have been open. As we sit here today during this interview, they still haven't been fully reopened. Our kids deserve to be in the classroom, and we deserve to have a governor that's going to stand up for our kids. There is no substitute for in-classroom instruction. Zoom is no substitute for doing that. I would have absolutely demanded that our public schools would have been open. And I will do that if they're not when I'm elected as governor.
I guess to drill down on that question, though, specifically, how would you deal with a lobbying group as powerful as CTA with Democratic supermajorities in the legislature.
Yeah, I'd stand up and use all the powers of the governor that says this is an emergency. I'm going to open the schools, period. And again, this is standing up. It's not about the lobbying that this governor, I think you're rightfully pointing out, was susceptible to. You have to stand up and say, what is in the best interest of our kids? What's in the best interest of families? I won't bend to that. You can't do that. And particularly the effect that it had on so many folks, again, back to the inequities, whose parents, had to make the choice. Am I going to go to work today, or am I going to stay home for my kid because of Zoom and education? Classrooms needed to be open. This governor didn't stand up and make that stand. I will.
Governor, we're going to have Jack Oman ask another question.
Mayor, would-be governor. Is democracy in trouble in the United States?
Oh, I think our democracy is strong. And I think our country is divided right now. There's no doubt about it. But I also think why I'm running for governor in part is to bring the state together. And I'm a big believer. As I said earlier, if you have that ability, and I, my governing style as mayor was I treat people with dignity and respect, even if we may disagree. And I was known for that. I think we need a little bit more of that, not just in California, but certainly nationwide. And so I was able to bring San Diegans together after a crisis. We're certainly going through a lot in this country right now, but I will tell you, I'm encouraged that folks want the best, and that's why I think people want to change in California right now. And I think that's one of the reasons. When you saw that 2 million people signed this recall petition, that's democracy in action. This was Republicans, Democrats, and independents who said, we don't like the direction of our state and we want to do something about it. I feel very, very passionate about providing alternatives. And my campaign and our campaign is how we've rolled this out has been a substantive campaign. It's been a real campaign with policy, not just ideals and objectives, but it's really focused on solutions. I think that's what democracy is about. If you have problems, what is your solution? If you don't like the direction under this governor, what are you going to do differently? And so our campaign is not about gimmicks. It's not about, the carnival atmosphere. There are real serious issues facing our state, and I think Californians expect and deserve a serious debate on those issues. And that's what I've been trying to provide, and I will continue to in the next 6 weeks of this campaign.
Bear for the last 6 weeks of the campaign? Is that no?
What's that? Sorry?
Not going to have a bear for the last 6 weeks of the campaign?
No bear.
No animals of any kind?
No bear, no animals.
Something from the San Diego Zoo, perhaps?
No, you can go there. That's right.
All right. So let me follow up on that. Your calling card, one of your calling cards in this campaign has been your ability to, rather successfully function as a mayor in San Francisco that is an increasingly Democratic city, correct?
San Diego, yes.
Excuse me, in San Diego, excuse me. More coffee, please. So do you see the dichotomy when I ask you the question about President Trump, where your personal style is to try to be collaborative and bring people together? And it is. And so at the beginning of your answer, you said, that's how you govern. Do you think that President Trump, I won't ask you whether he's a liar again, because I know you won't answer it. Do you think that President Trump operated that way? And in 2016, you said you could never vote for him. And then you said that you voted for him in 2020.
I appreciate the question. Okay. I would often disagree on the former president's approach. I have a different approach. Okay. I have a different style. I think my approach and my style is one that Californians want right now. And again, this is going to be a campaign that is based upon solutions, the campaign that is based upon results. And yes, a Republican who understands that to be successful, you better be able to work with Democrats, you better be able to work with independents, because at the end of the day, You could spend all your time if you wanted to, going back and forth and arguing with folks and trying to score political points. That's not what I'm about. I'm about real change and real solutions, and I'm optimistic about this campaign, or I wouldn't be doing it, that I think Californians will respond well to that approach. I think they've had a governor that has given you a bunch of rhetoric, a bunch of empty promises, and hasn't come through on stuff. I think they want somebody who has a track record of, hey, this guy was able to do a lot of things in San Diego, and he did it. My entire tenure, I had a majority Democrat city council. And in fact, my last several years, a supermajority Democrat city council. But I was able to get my budgets through, the housing reforms through that we talked about, the policing reforms through. Because again, I'm a big believer in common sense. It's not about partisanship, it's about leadership.
I have a quick question about fire response. Governor Newsom is in Washington today with President Biden and Vice President Harris, and they're talking about how California and the nation can respond to fires in California. Can you tell us what you would do differently in this very precarious situation that the state finds itself in on fire?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I think one of the things, again, that it really just came out in the media about a month ago is the governor took a lot of credit for things that didn't actually happen when it came to food reduction and treating acres that needed to be treated, thousands upon thousands of them. And one of the excuses that was given was, well, we couldn't get the environmental clearance. That's why I came out and I said very clearly, I'm going to declare a state of emergency and waive those environmental regulations to get going immediately on our fuel reduction that needs to happen, to get going immediately on the fire breaks and the emergency exits that haven't been created, particularly in our rural communities, to make sure that we never cut the CAL FIRE budget like the governor did by $100 million and then got caught when he said he didn't, but have that minimum funding of $1 billion a year. And I'm going to also, as I said, make the steps to do home hardening and others, provide incentives and tax credits to do that, to expedite this process. As I said, we got to treat this as a war footing, because it is that, it's life or death. We have suffered through, as in San Diego, as have many places across the state, devastating wildfire conditions. And so you can't keep doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result.
Can you link to climate change?
What's that?
Can you link the fires to climate change?
Well, I think there's everybody wants to blame climate change on everything, but I think what's clearly important is that if you're not reducing fuels, if you're not actually putting the dollars in for wildfire preparation, it's not going to change.
Well, I don't know that everybody wants to link to it. I'm asking you whether you think that there's a link between.
I think there's no doubt that. Look, I think, yes, the climate is changing, but I think, look, but it doesn't obfuscate the need to actually fund wildfire prevention, to actually get out and do the brush management and the fuel reduction. That is not happening. And you can't say, oh, we're not going to do it because environmental regulation. Really? No, you control that. That's what this is all about. Again, it's not about rhetoric. It's about taking action.
Thank you.
Mayor, the next question is from Tad Weber.
Mr. Mayor, we're going to come back to an issue that you had referenced early on today with us, and that's crime. So in cities across the state, crime trends are up significantly, particularly homicides. For an example, as earlier this month, Fresno had twice as many murders this year as in 2020. And shootings are up 36% year over year here in my city. Yet, on the other hand, just warehousing people in prison doesn't really seem to be much of an answer either. So, first of all, what specifically would you do to lower crime rates? And second, do you prefer reform-minded DAs like George Gascon of LA County, or more traditional law and order prosecutors such as Anne Marie Schubert in Sacramento County?
Oh, that's an easy question. Anne Marie Schubert. We got to stop the early release of violent criminals. The fact that this governor made 63,000 violent criminals eligible for early release is unconscionable. We have to empower and fund our police departments, not defund them. This governor enabled the defund the police movement. I had a vastly different view. I did not defund the police as mayor of San Diego. I increased the budget. And yes, I had protesters out in front of my house for a week in a row, several hundred at a time, yelling at me and my family, every name at the book that you can imagine, defund the police, etc. It only strengthened my resolve to do the right thing, which is if we want the best men and women to wear that badge and to be out there night and day, putting their lives on their line to protect us, we better darn well give them the training, the resources, and the tools to be successful. And that costs dollars. And what are we seeing? For all of those folks and some of my mayoral colleagues that came out and said, well, they thought it was the politically correct thing, I'm going to defund our police department. Well, guess what they're all doing right now? They're putting money back into the police budget because it's exactly what we're seeing. There has to be consequences for actions. If we do not have that, we are going to continue to see this spike in crime. And the fact that, in Walgreens in San Francisco shut down 13 stores. These are 13 stores now in neighborhoods throughout the city that aren't going to be able to serve families, aren't going to be able to have medication that you can go get. They shut them down because of violence and particularly the shoplifting and theft. This governor supported changes in state law that took stealing $950 from a felony down to a misdemeanor. This governor supported the same thing on using heroin and methamphetamine from a felony down to a misdemeanor. Put those two things together. What do you think we're seeing on the streets of California? I would suggest to you that is the exact wrong approach. We need to change that. There needs to be real consequences for actions. You need to have a governor that's going to stand up for victims in safe neighborhoods and not a governor that's going to empower criminals and do everything he can not to have consequences for actions because he thinks that it's the politically correct thing to do. I strongly disagree with that.
Mayor, let's go back to Tad Weber.
Okay. Let's, throughout our conversation today, you have been referencing leadership as a key plank of what you're about. And I don't have to tell you, if you were elected, if the recall is successful and you are chosen by the voters, you're going to face working with a supermajority Democratic legislature. That legislature, with all due respect, is a lot different than a city council in a single city. So talk to us about how you expect to get anything done when you're going to be facing that challenge.
It's different, but the principles are the same. And by the principles, I mean, as an executive, you have to be able to go out and win an argument publicly. I did that a lot as mayor. I will do that as governor. Because if you can go out and win the argument publicly, then you can win the vote. And if there's one thing I hope I've gotten across during our conversation today, it's that you may have different views on topics, but again, most of these I believe are common sense. And California's won a governor who's going to put it in terms of common sense and some of the changes that I'm talking about. And so that's the approach that I will take, to work with the leadership in the legislature, to work with the members of the legislature, but most importantly, to set a very clear agenda on the things that we are talking about. And that's one of the reasons that my campaign has been very specific about the policy proposals that we're going out, because I'm going to be very clear about how I view the future direction of this state and some of the things that I think we need to make changes. I believe all of those are not about party politics. All of these changes that I'm suggesting, I believe strongly, are common sense. And I think most Californians will agree with that. So I will spend a lot of time out there being very active, very engaged, just like I was with Mayor, laying the facts and the foundations on why I think we need to do something, and then going out to make that happen.
Before I go on, my apologies to both Tad and Stephanie. I asked a question out of order. That's my bad. Apologies. So I now throw the question to my colleague, Stephanie Finucane.
Mr. Mayor, California has the nation's highest housing costs, the highest prices for gasoline, and the most expensive utilities. Wage growth has been spectacular in the Silicon Valley, but not so much for some areas on the coast and in inland areas. In fact, some of those areas have some of the nation's highest poverty rates. In a very real sense, the California dream seems to be more like a mirage to people who are grinding it out day to day just to get by. Sir, how do you make the case that as governor, you can deliver the California dream to all Californians?
Again, I'm gonna agree with the premise of your question. It is absolutely correct. And that is the unfortunate reality for too many California families. It is too expensive. And I think what we saw, particularly this past November, again, where, measures were put on the ballot to increase, as an example, commercial property taxes to the highest, increase ever in California, which would have devastated small businesses, entrepreneurs in California. Californians have finally said, I've had enough. They're tired of paying the highest gas taxes in the country. Are our roads the best? No, they're not. They're not getting value. And so, again, what I will represent as governor is a fundamental shift that says it's not about sending more money to Sacramento. It's about letting Californians keep more of the money that they are making. That's why, as I said, we need a middle-class tax cut. We have to do it. And because if we don't, again, people are voting with their feet. For the first time, our great state lost population last year. We lost a congressional seat. I mean, I'll ask all of you, how many of you know somebody who's looking to leave California? Sure, many of you do. We all do. We are the Golden State. We are the state that has the can-do attitude and the entrepreneur spirit. We got to get back to that. And we got to get back to, again, have a state government that is good at doing, things that it should be doing, but not trying to constantly make it more burdensome and onerous for Californians. There's a limit. If we do not make our state more affordable, people are going to continue to vote with their feet.
Mayor, the next question goes to Yusef Beg.
Mayor, you referenced the defund the police movement last year, and obviously that was born out of the murder of George Floyd and the reckoning this state, this country went through. And I wanted to get a sense of how you feel equity should play a role in policymaking, and how improving opportunity and improving outcomes to uplift racial groups would be a focus for you as governor.
It should be, and it needs to be, and particularly when it comes to police reform. This is, again, an area that I feel very, very strongly about, because best practices today will not be best practices 5 years from now. On my very first day as mayor of San Diego, I hired a new police chief. I brought in the first female police chief in the history of San Diego, Chief Shelley Zimmerman. She did a remarkable job. We had some issues, very few number of officers, but I knew that we needed a change of leadership at the top. And we needed to have that leadership that understood that we needed to take the lead in terms of reforms. I will tell you, we became the first big city in California, in San Diego, to adopt body-worn cameras. They work. They protect the public. They protect the officers. And there was some pushback at first because it was different. It was new. It was reform. Now they're ubiquitous, of course. Every city has them all across the state. We move forward on, particularly, after the George Floyd murder, the duty to intervene, banning the carotid restraint. Again, you have to always be ready to make changes and reforms, because I said, again, best practices today are not going to be best practices years from now. And so I felt very strongly about that issue from the very beginning in terms of police performance, police oversight, police review. You have to have the community's trust of our police department. And that's something that you can never, ever take for granted. And it takes constant change, constant involvement, and constantly willing to look at things and do things differently if you need to.
Follow up too, obviously police reform is an important part of that, but we noted earlier, education is a place where we see inequities. The pandemic showed health outcomes vastly different for different racial groups. Beyond just police reform, what other areas do you feel like are important for California to keep pursuing to get to a place where we don't see those kind of disparities and California is a leader in this space like it likes to be?
No, I appreciate that follow-up. And let's go back to housing. Again, we have to actually construct more housing, not just give it rhetoric and lip service like this governor has done. We need to provide, and why, the plan I did in San Diego, again, complete communities, go through it, make it actually easier to construct. You can get a permit by right. If we do not increase the supply, we're not going to make it affordable. It's inequitable. And so that housing costs and housing production are hugely important of all income levels. And so, again, I think that's another good example of it's time for action and not just rhetoric.
Mayor, the next question is from Hannah Holzer.
Mayor, in the introductory letter to San Diego's most recent Climate Action Plan's annual report, you wrote that, quote, "In San Diego, climate action isn't just a phrase, it's a way of life. The way that you answered my colleague Jack Oman's question on whether there's a link between wildfires and climate change makes me question whether you actually believe that. In addition, the Chronicle reported yesterday that you once lobbied for an auto group that questioned climate science. Do you regret the decision to lobby for the Coalition for Vehicle Choice? And more broadly, how can California more effectively mitigate climate change?"
Oh, I do believe in climate change. And as I said, I was proud of the work that we did on our climate action plan in San Diego. And in fact, we brought together environmental groups and business groups to have a plan that would actually have action and measurable benchmarks. Was proud, for example, on the work that we did on solar adoption and providing the incentives. We're the second best city in terms of solar adoption in the United States. I was proud of the work that we did in terms of water recycling. We moved forward on the Pure Water program when I was mayor, the largest water recycling program in the state of California right now. I got that across the finish line. It wasn't easy, but again, it was the right thing to do for a sustainability standpoint in San Diegans, and that's going to create a third of our water supply. And that's critically important because we're at the end of the pipe in San Diego, relying, of course, on the Colorado River and the State Water Project. So I was very proud of the work that we did. I was very proud of the work that I did is on Mission Bay Park in terms of Mission Bay in San Diego, a big initiative that we put on the ballot that ensures that the money will stay there for Mission Bay for environmental protection in perpetuity. Clean water, clean air, that's part of who we are as Californians. That's part of our DNA. And again, that's the approach I took as mayor. And again, I think I was pretty successful in bringing all stakeholders together, environmental groups, business groups, because we are all in this together. And I think the policies and the plans that we put forward were reflective of that. And that was stuff that I was very, very proud of.
Mayor, the next question is from Garth Stapley.
Mayor, what do you think about masks in schools? Who should make that decision and why?
Yeah, I've not been a supporter of that. I think I'm very, parents, I think are have to be part of the leaders of this. And again, we need to get our kids, back in school. And I think part of, again, back to the shifting views that we have seen coming out, 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, it was, you could have kids safely back in school as long as they were social distance. Now that changed again as of last week, saying, no, they're recommending that kids, should have masks. I think some of the fallout that we will see, the mental health and other things for kids, it's just not something that I think we need to move moving forward on. And I feel, and I think a lot of parents feel the same way.
Mayor, the next question is from Jack Oman.
Presumably you worked with Governor Newsom for a year in your last year as San Diego mayor, correct?
Yes, I did.
Have you had personal conversations with Governor Newsom?
I have.
Did you find them productive?
We had a couple of conversations, as all mayors did. We went up and with the governor on several occasions, advocating for homeless dollars. We spoke during one of the wildfires a couple of years ago, and I was very strong, leading the effort not only under Governor Newsom, but when we started as mayors, called our Big 13 mayors, to lead the effort to get more state dollars to actually start helping on homelessness. I was one that said homelessness is not just an issue, it is the issue. And
Well,
so I was very helpful with Governor Brown as well as Governor Newsom on that, with my fellow colleagues, my fellow mayors.
Well, my question is, did you talk to him on the phone yourself? I mean, do you have a personal relationship with Governor Newsom?
I wouldn't say we're extremely close, no.
I probably wouldn't either, but did you enjoy your interactions with him?
They were very brief, and they were very fine.
Okay, very good. Would you be comfortable with Larry Elder as governor?
Oh, look, I think I'm going to be governor, and I think that Californians want somebody who's pragmatic like myself. I think that, again, the campaign that we've set up is, how do you win? You win by addition, and this is a campaign that is geared to all Californians on the issues that I think that they care about the most. And so, we got a lot of work to do. There's the heart of the campaign is starting now. But again, I wouldn't be running if I didn't think the time was right, and that California was going to be receptive to the approach that I've talked about on all of the issues with you all this morning.
Mayor, can I ask the question again? Would you be comfortable with Larry Elder as governor? I mean, I'm asking a number of questions, and just yes or no.
I appreciate your question. I'm not running against other Republicans. I'm running against Gavin Newsom, and I think that's what the cleared voters have a choice. And again, that's how I'm running this campaign. And I think that all the other candidates are going to have the opportunity to make their same case, just like I'm making to the voters. And I'm confident that if we get our word and our message out, the voters want to change at the top, and they want to elect me to bring the pragmatic leadership that our state needs.
Would you be?
Mayor, why don't we go to Tad Weber?
Okay, thank you. Jack kind of was on a theme that I was going to ask about, so let me ask it a slightly different way. Totally understand that you expect to win. Of course you do. You have to believe that way. But as you know, the poll came out this week that shows Larry Elder has about 18% support. You and Mr. Cox were at about 10%, if I remember it correctly. Still a lot of voters haven't made up their minds, still time to go. But Larry Elder is almost twice as much as you at this juncture. So how do you react to that? And what do you need to do? What are your plans to overcome that? He has a very big megaphone in Southern California.
I'm very excited about where we are. And in fact, I think it's very clear that the more folks that get to know me as I'm introducing myself outside of the realms of Southern California, the more they're going to support the kind of results-oriented and approach, as I said, that brings people together. I think you hit the nail on the head as well, by the way, with the strong amount of folks that have not decided on this race. I think that as Californians do decide, I'm going to give them a real choice, a real opportunity of experience and results. And again, I wouldn't be running if I didn't think that at the end of the day that folks want to choose that. And so I'm very excited about where we are, the momentum that our campaign has. We're going to start some debates here coming up. I believe next week is our first one. And I think there's going to be a clear choice. And I'm looking forward to putting that choice out there. And I think if we do that, we're going to be successful.
Mayor, let's go to Stephanie Finucane.
Mr. Mayor, when we discussed vaccines, you said you prefer to educate rather than mandate. And yet we've been trying that and the COVID rates keep rising. We know there are some people who absolutely refuse to be vaccinated. So how would you handle that?
We got to keep pushing. And I think that it's imperative. And again, this is not a partisan issue. This requires everybody to lean into this and urge Californians to get vaccinated. And there's been so much politics on both sides of this. We really got to cut that out. This is about This is about public safety. This is about health. And so I think that the more you continue that, I think the folks that were predisposed to obviously get a vaccine have done it. You have to continue the education. You have to do it every day. You have to do it every night. And I think that that is, at the end, our best opportunity to get folks vaccinated. And the more I think that they see the results and the positive effects of that, the more we're going to see those vaccination rates go up. And that's what we want, and that's what we need in California.